Welcome back to the BTR Boxing Podcast Network. I am your host, Sean, and I'm joined by a very special guest for this particular episode. If you are a lover of the collectible show, the King of Collectibles, the Goldin Touch, then I have got a great guest on this show today. It's Dave Amerman, the Director of Consignments for Goldin Solutions. Dave, you are on this show because you have got a huge consignment of boxing memorabilia that you are auctioning on Goldin at the moment, and I'm really excited to have you on to talk about some of the particular items that you've got out there, but also just in general how you guys would procure those type of items and how you would authenticate those type of items. But I'm going to pass the mic to you now and let you do your introduction, and thank you for coming on.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is a really unique opportunity. We've been working on quite some time with this boxing collection. It's a very specialized sale. So we kind of, when we started putting it together, it was a one consigner collection initially that we were looking at. And, we knew King of Collectibles coming out on Netflix. We wanted to be able to, really get this out to the masses because it's so unique. Not everybody knows about Jack Johnson or Jim Jeffries or any of these boxers at the turn of the 20th century, really when before UFC, back when you go in there and box 30 rounds, right? But yeah, everything's available currently on goldinauctions.com or goldin.com, our website, and there's over 1,000 lots of just boxing historical items, including video cameras that filmed Ali and Tyson to championship belts and rings, and I'm sure we'll get into some details, but it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I've been having a look through some of the items in that collection, and for people that listen to our show, you guys that listen to us, you know the sort of stuff that we do. We've done career profiles on Jack Johnson and Muhammad Ali. We've done things on Joe Gans. We've done things on all these different types of fighters from many different eras. So it's amazing to see the type of stuff that has been procured for this particular auction. And as you rightly said, it is a very unique opportunity for anybody out there that is a collector to be able to go out there and bid on some of those items. I mean, I was looking through there before and I've seen photographs of Jack Johnson, probably very rarely seen photographs of Jack Johnson and his wife, and photographs of his wife Mabel Sykes on her own. And I was quite flabbergasted to look at this stuff and think, wow, how have they managed to procure this stuff? How have they managed to get it? So I suppose that's my first question really, is like, there's so many different items there. How have you managed to procure these unique items?
This collection of Jack Johnson came by an individual collector. Most of them. We actually have more than one consignor. Once we got this collection, we started saying, okay, we have something here. How can we turn this into an event? Because it was a great collection. There was about 700 pieces in this individual's collection. We added an extra 300 pieces to the collection. This individual, it's interesting because you'd say, well, why does he like Jack Johnson? How did he get the items? And he's a very spiritual person. I went to his house. There was cameras set up everywhere. This individual actually communicates with the deceased and very much believes so. And when I was there, we saw some pretty interesting things occurring, things falling over that shouldn't have been. We watched the video over. I was getting chills. It was a surreal experience to be there. But this individual feels like he's connected with Jack Johnson. He feels the hardships of Jack. He feels that the ghost of Jack actually even visits him and he communicates with him. So over the years, he's acquired original photographs, all sorts of pieces, from pill bottles that Jack endorsed to items that he had been given or were given out at his fights, fight tickets, things like that. But the photograph collection really had hung over almost every inch of every wall of the downstairs level. We're talking like a 4-story house out in Beverly Hills that overlooks Sharon Tate's property, actually. So there's a lot of historical, nostalgia going on in that area. And actually, I believe he was even on an episode or a few different episodes of some of the Paranormal Activities and things like that with this collection. So definitely a different angle and twist. But, this gentleman didn't want to sell anything, honestly. It was just a matter of him having to raise some money for some renovations to the properties and some other things like that, and just decided it was time. And typically with a collection like this, when you decide it's time to let a few pieces go, the rest of the collection follows right behind as well. So, he wanted to give me every single piece, and I was willing to do that for him. And instead of what most auctions will do is when you pick up a collection of postcards or vintage items that maybe only are worth 50 to a few $100s, you tend to lot them in a groups of lots. So when you make these high-end auctions, you might buy 50 postcards in one lot. But we realized, this is just too special to group too many things in, and we wanted to do him a favor. Obviously, he's, again, not wanting to sell this, so we wanted to make the most money for him. Everybody wins when that happens. So we listed out all 700 plus items. We were there for 2 days collecting the items and going through the collection, and he was giving us stories. He actually had a website himself where he kept a lot of the inventory, and he had photographs. So the inventory actually worked out really well. We shipped most of it back to New Jersey from California, across the country. And when it arrived, we had given out to our inventory team catalogs with images and titling so they can go and match everything up. Once we got it in-house and we got it all cataloged, we then immediately realized, okay, a lot of these photographs, we need to figure out, are they type 1? Are they printed around within a year or two of when they were printed? Are they from later, like the 50s and 60s? So we actually went and got over 200 of the photographs encapsulated by PSA. And luckily with our relationship there, they were able to turn it around in a few months' time so we could get it up and live, right after the Netflix show aired. But it's incredible, the history, like you mentioned, with some of these photos. One of my favorites in here is there's a childhood photo of Jack Johnson as a boy. Those, you just never find those. And even if you do, most of the time you don't even know, is that Jack Johnson? In our business, I can't tell you how many people have emailed me saying, I have a picture of Babe Ruth as a little kid. And you're like, could be any kid that looks like Babe Ruth, so it's really hard to identify in photos, especially early childhood photos. But that one had a line of provenance going right back to the family. So we have everything from there up and until when he went over to France, and we have plenty of pieces from his time over there. And then we even have original photographs when he was locked up and in prison. He was locked up in prison for a little while, and we have a photo of him in a boxing match, I guess an exhibition while he was in prison, and we have a photo of him on the day he was released. So those are some really special items. But we even have photographs from the colored championships of the world back prior to his main heavyweight championships, where they allowed him to compete, with everyone. So we have some of the original fights, photographs from the fights when he was fighting for the colored championships, and we even have tickets from those events and train tickets going to the events. Really just some really cool items. And then, fortunately for us, we didn't have to go and pinpoint and pick them all together. But this individual for decades was doing that, and we're able to bring it to the market. In addition to that collection, we went and got, we partnered with Craig Hamilton, who's a big boxing expert. And Craig helped us put together some other pieces, and he knew where some gems were. And in particular, lot number 2 is Jim Jeffries' sash belt. Now, when I first heard about this, I thought, oh, this is Jim Jeffries' championship belt. But it's not even Jim Jeffries' championship belt. This is the American flag that you would have seen Jim wearing around his waist. And at first, it's such a thick belt, you're like, okay, it looks like a championship belt. We found newspaper articles, we found all sorts of things that actually show him in the ring, perhaps boxing with this belt on. So it really just takes it to the next level. There's 4 or 5 different photographs from different trading cards, different studio photos, and even newspapers that drew cartoons that show him wearing this American flag-like belt while he's in the ring with these guys. So you can actually see how much more important this belt is, than anything. But I love personally, another thing in this collection is the Muhammad Ali collection. Muhammad Ali's chef just so happened to watch the show, just so happened to reach out and say, hey, I've had some items I've been holding on for all these years. I was Ali's chef. And I was like, okay, we have a boxing auction coming up. Let's see what you got. He had original drawings that are 24 by 16 that it looked like it took Ali weeks to draw. ... And, Ali obviously had, he shook, he had the Parkinson's. So with Ali, he would dot on paper, and he used to do this for Steiner Sports when I worked over there. He would dot as if so he wouldn't look like he was shaking. He would dot so it would look like he was drawing. So he was something he would do while he sat there and just dotted around. And he would create these drawings where you can see tens of thousands of people in the crowd because he sat there dotting them. And it looks like it took him hours, if not weeks, to draw some of these. There's 2 or 3 different photos or drawings that he did of him and Frazier. We actually have his Quran that he used to read passages from with his chef that he gave to his chef, and he inscribed it and drew photos. He drew pictures inside as well. So for me, that's cool because obviously Muhammad Ali is known as Muhammad Ali because of his religion. He avoided the war because of his religious beliefs. Every autograph he ever signed after that was Muhammad Ali. So we actually have the Quran that is the basis of Ollie's faith, and it was his personal Quran in our auction right now. So for me, that could be a real sleeper. That there's no way to put a price on it. Now we authenticated because it came from Ollie's chef. We even got the signatures matched up and authenticated by a third-party service that authenticates signatures. And then, as we've noticed with a few of Ollie's drawings, they match, very much like his others. But that, I don't know if it's $5,000 or $500,000. We won't know until the auction comes to an end on July 12th.
So, what sort of figures do you have in mind for, or what expectations for figures do you have in mind for some of the very prominent lots that you've just been talking about with regards to Muhammad Ali and to Jack Johnson? I mentioned the three-time heavyweight championship ring being, seems to me like the premier lot of this particular auction, and one that will probably reach the most value in terms of what that would sell for.
Yeah, I think that you're right on the spot there. That's why we gave it lot number one. Ollie's three-time championship ring. It's as close as you're going to find. You're not going to get, like a baseball player will win an MVP award or a World Series ring or things like that you can get from different sports and different athletes. In boxing, yeah, you got the belts, but they're very hard to come by. So when you have a career ring like this, that really just kind of commemorates the whole career of the athlete, and you can trace it back to his, friends and family. It's really hard to put a price on this. One sold several years ago. Actually, it failed to sell in auction several years ago, but it did have some private offers up to about 250 and 300,000 on the ring. This ring particularly, if it sells for $100,000, I'm sure everyone will walk away, pretty happy. But it has the potential to be, several $100,000 on that ring. The Muhammad Ali drawings are a lot harder to pinpoint because there's nothing like them. And now I've seen some 8x10 and some small drawings for Ali, and they sell for a few thousand. But when you get to the magnitude and the size of these drawings, my initial thought was, okay, this should be at least 10 grand. Like anyone should pay 10 grand for this item. But does this item get to 50 grand? Is it 100,000? I mean, I think if Ali can sit there and sign, the way I look at it is this: if Ali can sit there and sign 100 autographs in 20 minutes, each autograph sells for $1,000, and it took him weeks to draw this piece. Obviously, let's magnify that, but I mean, this is a piece that should be in a museum, as well as Jim Jeffries' belt. We have a $20,000 opening bid on Jeffries' belt. Before the auction, we had a few people say, "Yeah, I'm interested, and I'm already in on that." So that one might get a little bit of a late action towards the end, but again, that's a steal of a price. If anyone gets that around 20,000. The Quran's going to be really interesting to see, but we even have some obscure items as well. We've got fight posters. We have a Marvin Hart autograph, which is a very rare one as well. He fought Jeffries and a few others. That's already bid at $6,000, just a cut signature. And then we have a ton of Jack Johnson autographs as well. One of my personal favorite Jack Johnson autographs in the auction is his business card. I just love when you have someone's business card. It was like in his pocket, right? He met him, he pulled it out of the pocket, he writes on the back, former heavyweight champ. Like just to get those type of personalizations, that one, again, it's not going to break the bank, but it should easily be a few $1,000s on that.
Looking at some particular ones as well, the one that sort of stood out to me in particular was the Steve Lott film camera used to film Muhammad Ali fights and Mike Tyson fights. So anybody that knows Steve Lott knows he's one of the most famous videographers in boxing over the past 40, 50 years. And he had the boxing, I think it was the Las Vegas Boxing Hall of Fame, if I remember correctly. And he used to put a lot of fight footage onto that particular channel. And for people that were looking for footage on certain fighters around certain periods of time, he was the go-to person for that stuff. And now, obviously, you've managed to procure in this whole auction one of his cameras that was used to film some of those fights. So I think that brings a lot of uniqueness to it due to the nature of it. Do you have any idea of specifically what fights that was used to film at all?
That's a very interesting piece. The provenance on that item is excellent, which is another reason why we're confidently offering it in our auction. It was actually consigned by a very big fight promoter who had a relationship with Steve. He obviously cherished it. It was one of his favorite. When we got his collection, which is most of the fight posters and things you see in the auction, which are pretty rare pieces that not everyone would have, when he consigned the collection, he basically said, this camera is something special here. And, It's unique. It's hard to say. A trading card sells 100 times over. You have values, you have trading values. I love pieces where you just can't put dollar amounts on them. If the camera went for 30, 40,000, I'd say it's justified. If it went for 5,000, I'd say, okay, I guess that's what a camera that filmed the boxing fight's worth. It's just such a wide range and it's so unique. But when you actually think of the history behind it, and if the photographs and the film from these fights are selling for big money, and I believe that camera additionally filmed Tyson in his early years as well. So you put two of the greatest ever, in that camera as well. It's really just hard to say because it doesn't display, it kind of belongs in the Hall of Fame, and I think the right person will come in and buy it for those reasons and hopefully preserve it. I think a lot of these items, that one Craig Hamilton authenticated, and a lot of that authentication there, and luckily we were able to do this because let's look at it this way. If an individual met Steve or the consignor of this piece and bought it in privately, it would lose a little bit of its provenance, meaning every time it changes hands, you lose a little bit of the connection from when it originally was first used. So we were able to capture that by defining the line of provenance right to Steve. And we were able to get Craig Hamilton, who owns JO Sports, the biggest boxing authenticator in the business, to come into our office and look at this great collection of all these items and write letters on a handful of them. And we shared the stories from Steve and from the consignor about the camera, in which then Craig wrote a beautiful letter on. So now whoever goes to purchase that isn't going to have to explain to their children or their grandchildren or any museum that wants it. It's going to have all this documented with it, which really is where the value lies, on a piece like that. But when you think about how important that piece was to boxing history, and if, going back to the Jack Johnson days, boxing matches were not televised, right? You actually had to go to a tent. It was almost like underground, and watch these films of these fights. It was kind of like a little bit of a speakeasy, I guess, you could say, right? Where people were, not allowed to drink alcohol, but they'd go to these places. It's kind of the same thing with boxing match. You had to go to watch these, and there's actually tickets from these events as well. So makes the camera even a lot more important, when you think about the history of fighting and, the way it was mainstreamly televised. And, a lot of these fights as well, as they showed the fights, but they also had tickets where you could go to a movie theater and then watch these fights as well. So this is a real piece of boxing history where, like Thrilla in Manila and Rumble in the Jungle, all those, you could have gone to a movie theater to have watched it. There was no Showtime, or HBO, at the time you'd go to a movie theater. So when you think of it that way, you're like, wow, okay, now we're talking real history. This is a piece that was filming a movie essentially, for the time being. So again, it's the way I look at it is it's priceless. It's worth what people are willing to pay. My job as, the auction house is to let everybody know it's available, let everybody get in there and be able to compete for it. And we'll ultimately know, what it's worth. And hopefully it is worth a lot.
Yeah, there's some really interesting pieces, like for people that are collectors of specific things like fight tickets, ticket stubs, things of that nature seem to be quite high up on a lot of boxing collectors' list. I know many people personally that like to collect this type of stuff, and I noticed a few of them. A Jack Johnson ticket stub was in there. I noticed in particular from the Tommy Burns fight, from when he won the World Heavyweight Championship for the first time, the first African American to do so at that point in time. And then there was the one with Jack Dempsey versus Gene Tunney, the long count fight, another infamous moment in the history of this particular sport. But to have those specific tickets from those specific fights, it's certainly got to add that value to it. But it's a very unique auction in the sense that you are only going to sort of pull a certain audience in for this, aren't you, because of the nature of it as well. So does that make it more difficult as an auction house because you're only targeting in on a certain demographic of people to do so?
Very much so. It works both ways, right? So because it's very specific, clearly we know who to target, right? You target the boxing audience. However, a boxing audience is going to be very different from your baseball and football, soccer and everything else. And honestly, it appeals to everybody, right? Everybody had to probably defend off a bully, back in the day, right? Everybody kind of wants to be able to throw some punches. So it's a much more broadly appealing, or it should be, a sport. What I've also noticed is there's a crossover here. Not only are we looking for the right boxing collector, but you also have a vintage photograph collector and a historical collector, right? Anyone that just likes history, when you think about this, right? This is Jackie Robinson before Jackie Robinson. This is this is civil rights. This is when you learn the Jack Johnson story. It really, it's shocking. The guy was the best fighter in the world. He never got the credit. Sure, he was driving fancy cars, and he was dating white women, and there was things going on that a lot of people did not agree with, and they really wanted to stick it to him. And he ended up going to jail. I mean, again, if this was, modern day, he would be heroicized everywhere. And, one of the most popular figures, one of the wealthiest figures, ever. But, and again, these guys weren't fighting 8, rounds with the big gloves on. These guys were fighting until somebody couldn't go on, and it's just amazing to think how these, there weren't more deaths really in the ring and other things like that as well. But just to hear what he had to go through before and after, he actually had one piece that I'm really disappointed didn't make it into this sale, and maybe we'll have it up for future auction, is he wrote, the authentication was, we're trying to work that out, but the inscription says, "Heavy is the head that wears the crown, Jack Johnson." And when you think about that line, you're like, wow, like that just describes the whole thing, right? Like that should not be the case, right? You've made it to the top. And, unfortunately, you still have to deal with all that. And I think he, again, just like Jackie Robinson and all these other athletes, that came after, kind of paved the way for sports today. And of course, boxing was a little different because it's like, hey, you want to come in there and fight with me? Like, the people, they wanted to see that, right? They wanted to see him lose. They wanted to see him out of the ring. So they were like, let's get our toughest guys in against him. Let's get somebody to beat him, and unfortunately they couldn't for the longest time, and it just probably infuriated him even more. And I think he was admired and well respected, but as a fighter, and I think even in today's society, a fighter is not exactly the most, how do you put it, prestigious, most highly touted individual. They're more looked at like the tough guy. And, they, in certain social settings, they don't always get the same, due praises, perhaps somebody in a different line of work or a different sport. But, there's nothing you can't respect about Jack and what he did for the sport of boxing. And that's why we're throwing this auction, is partially a tribute as well. Last year we did a Jackie Robinson Day auction. It did great. It was actually featured on one of our episodes on the Netflix show. And, to follow that up, we wanted to do something for the Jack Johnson collection. So you may not find, these pieces have been in a private collection for 20 plus years, if not maybe 30 or 40. You may not find these again when, people do eventually acquire them. Our photograph authenticator said, hey, you guys aren't seriously putting all this in one auction, are you? He's like, you're going to kill the value of this stuff. And I said, I don't know. I'm going to. I said, but I don't know if I'm going to kill the value because, yeah, there's a lot of choices, right? When there's less choices, the pieces will maybe go for a little higher, at least it would seem. But when you look at the auction and it reads chronologically and you could look at the fights, you can look at the pictures, you can put the story together. And as much as I thought I knew about Jack Johnson going into this collection, I know so much more right now just by looking at this collection and kind of studying it and just, really putting it all together. It just really kind of tells a story and ties in some of the other fighters at the time that, you might not think about, or you might have heard their name, but now you're like, oh, wait, that's okay. Now it kind of all starts to make sense when you look at the storyline behind everything, the timing.
So with this auction then, obviously we've got a limited period of time on it that people can go on and to the website, as you mentioned earlier, and actually go on and bid for a lot of these items. Given the potential success of this auction and what this could lead to, will this be more of a mainstay feature with Goldin in the future in terms of looking to procure more boxing memorabilia to put into on auctions on an annual basis?
So yes, anything we do, the idea is we want to do the best for the collection and make the most money. That's first and foremost. But what always happens is, someone else who happens to have a Jack Johnson piece or, when he looks it up online, they're going to say, oh, wait, who's Goldin? I see they sold a big collection. Naturally, you're going to get, more items that are similar to what you've sold because people want to sell when they see what things sell for. So now that we have a lot, of examples to show people that, we're going to certainly follow up. But we've actually been pretty strong in boxing, from the beginning. We sold some Ali gloves for 500,000 plus. When we first started, we've sold some big robes. We've got some big Ali pieces coming up. And we actually have in our house right now, it's not up for sale yet, but Joe Egan, former professional boxer, Joe Egan from England, or actually, I'm sorry, he's from Scotland. he came over, and I apologize to Joe if I'm butchering that, but he came over to the U.S. when he was 17, and he started training with a young Mike Tyson, and he was thrilled because they were both the same age, and he was used to fighting these big guys. And Joe has consigned Joe. I'll keep going with the story actually, so you can follow along here. Joe shared his shorts with Tyson. So Tyson's wearing these Irish white shorts and green trim in his third and fourth pro fight. In his first and second pro fight, he wore a white pair of shorts with blue trim. And when him and Joe, basically they traded, right? These guys weren't making a ton of money. They both came from pretty humble beginnings. You know, they were excited about a bag of potato chips and some sweatpants, you know, as gifts. They exchanged shorts, and they each fought with each other's shorts on. And what it happens to be is those shorts were Mike Tyson's first ever professional fight worn shorts that later on Joe ended up having Tyson sign them for him. Joe kept them, and he's now consigned them to Goldin Auctions, and they're going to come up in a future auction for sale as well. So, you know, we've got some awesome boxing items coming up as well in future opportunities and future sales. So I think that was great. Joe is a pleasure to deal with. I love listening to his stories. He wrote a book with Tyson, you know, or about Tyson, you know, so they have photos of Mike with the shorts, you know, the provenance is everything. Craig's going to authenticate them. We're going to get them photo matched as well. But those are going to go in our Goldin 100 Part 2, which is going to be 100 of the biggest and best items, you know, that of all different sports. And that'll come up in about a month from now as well. So that'll, yeah, that could be one of the best and biggest boxing shorts, you know, ever to come out. Obviously, nothing like an Ali championship fight worn, or even maybe a Tyson, you know, original championship fight worn shorts. His classic black, of course, but his first pro fight. When you're looking at other sports and that player makes that debut, that's where the money usually is, because nobody keeps that. I mean, if Tyson didn't give them the Joe, they probably would have ended up in the trash. So for them to even exist is you know, pretty impressive in itself, but to be able to offer those up in an auction as well is great. So yeah, we love doing things like this and getting opportunities to just keep going and do more and more. And yeah, we hope that the Jack Johnson collection and our boxing auction here will open the doors for some other great collections that maybe are hiding out there that we didn't know about.
So there's one particular pin, Dave, that I wanted to just bring to your attention, just discuss. Now, we're talking about Jack Johnson again. I'm going back to the Jack Johnson conversation just because I think this is predominantly what's in the majority of this particular auction. And there's one particular pin, lot 1056, and it's a Don't Monkey With Me pin. And I'm looking through it and I'm thinking, oh my God, is this the sign of what the times really were back then? Because we do a lot of stuff for our career profiles episode on Jack Johnson, and we highlight a lot of the racist elements of what life was like for someone like Jack Johnson at that particular point in time. Someone who was kind of thrusted himself into the limelight, and people didn't want him to be the world heavyweight champion, which was why there was a coloured world championship in all the different weight categories at the time. But this particular lot seems to be a bit more of a racial insinuation of what maybe was people's mentality at the time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing that they would just put it out on buttons and pins and things. And there's others, you know, similar when you kind of read into some of those other pins. And you know, there was some newspapers and some magazines in there where Jeffries is on the front and it says something like a white 4th of July, but then you have Jack Johnson on the other one. It's talking about will 4th be black. You know, we actually ended up pulling out about 15 pieces as well because they were a little bit even too sensitive. You know, that's the other nature of what we're dealing with here as well. You know, we certainly don't want to be offensive. But, you know, at the end of the day, these are pieces of history, and, you know, we're not saying we support, you know, any of this behavior. It's quite the opposite. But yeah, I mean, that pin and a few other pieces you'll see in here if you dig deep, some of these postcards as well, even the cartoons of Johnson, they make him look like an animal, you know, like they created him out to be this animal in these drawings. You know, so any chance anyone could get, you know, to kind of take a jab at him or do something like this, and it would really just kind of, you know, it just added to the culture then, and it just added to the racial insensitivity. It just kind of fueled the fire, right? It's kind of like what we've recently been experiencing over these last few years is it takes something, you know, some media or something like that to kind of fuel the fire here. And that's what we're seeing then is, you know, you're kind of getting, you know, these segregated groups to root for each other. And, you know, you have to root for your color guy, you know, as opposed to just rooting for the person and, you know, looking past all of that. And, you know, we're not talking about 500 years ago. You know, that's what's crazy about these things is these are scenarios that are happening within the last 100 years, or for the most part. It's really amazing when you think, wow, you don't have to go back that far in time. And honestly, I mean, you really don't have to go back far at all. But when you think about how openly acceptable this type of view was on certain people, and the fact that they separated the championships and everything, as if these individuals weren't people themselves. It's really shocking. And I think with items like that button and some of the other pieces, you won't see that type of item coming to. You won't see those being manufactured in today's society for the most part. So, these are pieces hopefully that are signifying, the end of this era, where, we, again, such a short while ago, but, it shows how far we've come, as well, in the last 100 years.
Absolutely. There's some very unique pieces within the whole auction. Looking through, you can buy anything from fight tickets to fight posters. You can buy ornaments. You can buy cardboard cutouts. I've seen a couple of Muhammad Ali cardboard cutouts in the auction as well. So anybody that loves auctions and collectibles, this is definitely probably one of the most prominent boxing memorabilia auctions going at the moment. And for anybody listening to the show, please make sure you go and check this out, because there are some absolutely unbelievable pieces of boxing memorabilia here. Now, it is a time sensitive auction, and as we record this episode, how long have we got left at this moment in time? What date does it finish? What time does it finish for people to go on and actually bid for some of these unique items?
Yeah, the auction is only got 9 days left as of right now, so it's coming right up. July 12th is the closing date. The auction is going to end at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and the way that our auctions run usually, and especially this one included, is you have to get a bid in before then. So I would recommend anyone not waiting to the last minute. You want to get in there and just kind of see what you're interested in. And if you get your bids in early, we're going to have to qualify you, especially international bidders as well. When you sign up, you're not going to have the ability to spend 50 grand or 100 grand until we qualify you by taking a few steps. First, we don't want anyone in there just bidding around, and that it's not going to, obviously pay for these items, because our seller, is going to want to be paid for them as well. So we're going to have to qualify everybody a little bit ahead of time, but there's just a little over a week left on these items. And again, these collections have been in the private collectors' hands for decades. And it all kind of boils down here in the next couple of weeks. But once you get into the extended bidding period, meaning you've placed a lot, now we're at 9 p.m. on the closed July 12th on Goldin.com. At that point, every time a bid is placed, the clock will extend 30 minutes just on that item. So that's when you get 2 guys, 3 guys, 4 guys that can go back and forth. But if you just kind of jump in at the very end on the last day, you're going to say, oh, I want to bid on this, that, and the next thing, and you'll be locked out because you haven't already placed your bids. So yeah, very time sensitive to bid on the collection. But again, there's still 9 days remaining, and just because somebody finds this maybe the day of and thinks there's not enough time, we will be working the night of the close. You can email us 2 hours prior with some information, and we'll get you set up and bidding. There's never somebody that says I'm too late. I've had phone calls in extended periods with people that want to get it, and we'll absolutely take the call and do what we need to do to make sure you're able to participate. So, it's never too late to get in as long as you reach out, and there's always somebody on the support channels helping out. But yeah, I would definitely advise going out there and taking a look. And, there's some items we haven't even mentioned, like Evander Holyfield fight-worn gloves and Archie Moore championship belt. Ali has drawn on some boxing gloves, and we have 3 pairs of his personally owned shorts in the auction. So I mean, the list goes on and on. There's over 1,000 lots, and you don't need $1 million to participate. There's a few items in there at $25 bids that have no bids yet, so there's plenty of a little bit of something for everybody to take home a piece of this collection.
Absolutely. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, out of over 1,000 lots that you've got in this auction, is there one particular lot that stands out to you, or one particular one that you've seen, that you've come across, that really stands out and resonates with you in particular?
There's a lot. It's really hard to pinpoint one, but if I had to, I think purely just on the aesthetic and the visual of this item, it's at lot number 8 in the auction. It is a panoramic, 6-foot wide panoramic photograph of the Jim Jeffries Jack Johnson fight. And again, remember, 1910 panoramic quality and, film quality, how hard it was to get a 6 foot wide photograph printed. This must have cost hundreds of dollars at the time. We have a 6 foot wide photo that shows the entire ring. And the way that panoramics were back then, it was like top and bottom, right? It wasn't just one shot. But that piece, when I saw that on the wall, it was just a piece that you're like, wow, like that. Just, again, as many pieces that are in this collection, there's nothing that really kind of impresses someone when they walk in and they see a 6 foot wide photograph of a huge title fight with Jack Johnson, Jim Jeffries, one of the most important fights of his career. That's that size, and it's still framed. It's that one. It was not easy getting it to us here to auction. We got it here, and we're happy to get it to the winning bidder. But if there's one piece that I think, you can't really tell how incredible it is online, that's going to be one of those items. Because when you look online, for all you know, it looks like a 3x5, with the little index card, but it's actually, bigger than this board behind me here.
So, well, a final question really is, you mentioned a lot about authentication of a lot of these items, and I know you guys are so stringent with how you do this and how you use third parties that you're related to be able to put this into place. Specifically, what is it that for something like a boxing memorabilia item, how do you trace its lineage to get an actual authentication for it? Because I know out there's been many cases in the past, court cases, where people well known within boxing have actually been sentenced to prison time because of the fact that they've committed memorabilia fraud. And there's been quite a few well-known cases in the US in particular that have happened over the past 20-30 years. But how do you guys trace the lineage of a lot of these items and authenticate them?
Yeah, that's one of the most important things that we do. That's why you would come, to a place like Goldin to sell and buy your collectibles, because you'd want to make sure that it was vetted. You're going to have the backing of a company like Goldin, where if there's ever an issue or anything did come to light, down the line, we're a company that's not going anywhere anytime soon. We're going to stand behind everything we're saying. When it comes to photographs, the science there is really interesting because there's only a few experts that even authenticate photographs, and we actually have one in-house who wrote the book on vintage photography, and his partner as well, who works with PSA DNA. They wrote a book on vintage photography, and they can tell by looking at the coloration of the print. They can tell by the quality of the print if it's really clear and it looks like it came off a glass slide versus a little bit more fuzzy that was printed from the photograph. And there's also things you're looking for on the original photographs, like is there studio markings on the back or on the front? Was this used in publications? A lot of times on the original photographs on the back, you'll see dates, stamps, and dates like that say Sporting News 1929 or, this place 1910, and you can follow all those markings. Some of them were used in 4 or 5 different publications as well. Dana Studios is another one that did a lot of the original photography for a lot of these fights. There's a lot of Dana Studios markings on a lot of these different paintings, or pictures. So we're looking at all of that. And again, not just us, but we have the third parties, they took them into the studio to evaluate as well. When it comes to the provenance on some of the other pieces, again, like you said, there's been stories and scenarios. Everybody's, trying to make an extra dollar here. We've had 3 different autograph companies come in and look at the structure on the autographs. I'll be honest, 4 or 5 autographs did not make the auction. That, unfortunately, kind of like the one I was explaining with the inscription, where things just looked a little unique. And honestly, some of these pieces 10, 15, 20 years ago, when our consignor had purchased them, they had maybe passed the authentication standards. So we've tightened up the reins a lot. And then on the Ali collection, where the items are personally owned by him, something that is interesting in here. There's a book for Ali, and it's by Howard Bingham as well, who was his well-known photographer. And the book is serial numbered 00000 of 10,000, and it's Ali's personal copy, and it comes from Ali's chef. So like there's these things that you just can't not unsee, pretty much, where you put the connection together. Now that book, again, in 10 years might just sell as a signed book, but right now we're like, this is Ali's personal copy. It's the serial number of the first one. It's Ali clearly had his hands on it. He drew on it, so there's these amazing connections to these pieces that is undeniable. And, again, just being around these athletes myself and just kind of seeing, how they how they sign and how they do different things. All these signature changed throughout the years as well, and obviously as the Parkinson's got worse, so there's different types of signatures there. Same thing with Jack Johnson as well. Jack Johnson, I mean, the J in his last name was always, very similar. It almost like he overwrote like the J in the CK and Jack, and then the O, it's unmistakable. And you can actually tell because the more examples we have of his handwriting, you can start to see the way he makes different letters as well. But a couple of his pieces were to this individual Harold. And then you start to notice, well, there's 3 different pieces all from this collection that came from Harold. So clearly at one point, someone bought that group from the family of Harold or whomever, and you could start to kind of piece, things together like that as well. But, mostly all of the items that have autographs, mostly all the items that are just photographs or other types like that, they come with another letter as well, a third-party authentication document that says, in our opinion, the autograph's authentic or the drawing was done in the hand of, so you get a couple different letters. So as I was saying before, like with the film camera, when you buy something here and you want to display it or resell it, you're going to have 2 or 3 or at least one document that's tracing back the evidence here of these. So when you go to resell it down the line, if that's the plan, you're going to have paperwork to go through with it. I know some auction houses that, they just put things out there. As much as I might know about things, I never claim to be the final source or the end all be all. I might feel confident, but if I can't get somebody else who's also in the business who authenticates for a living to trust what I'm saying and us to align, then unfortunately, plenty of good items don't even make it into these auctions because we just can't prove definitively that they are authentic, and we'd rather just not even sell them at all.
Yeah, makes 100% sense. It's a really, really good auction. And like I've repeated a few times, I think for everybody listening to the show, watching the show, please make sure you go and check the auction out. It's a very unique opportunity to own even a small slice of boxing history. This is the perfect time to go and do it. And obviously, Goldin is the place to go. Dave, just a final sign off from yourself then. Just to repeat a reminder of where to go, how to do it, and what to follow for people that may want to do it after listening and watching this interview.
Yeah, hopefully everybody goes and at least checks it out. We have plenty of other things going on the site. This is one of our 4 auctions that are live right now as well. So if you're into football or soccer or cricket even, or even entertainment, we have comics and Pokemon cards. There's something for everybody on the site. But if you're looking for a piece of this Jack Johnson collection, it's ending on July 12th. You can go to Goldin. It's GOLDIN.com. And you'll be able to find everything there. It's the July Boxing Elite Auction. And, again, my name is Dave Amerman. I'm the head of consignment here. I curated the auction. I'm also on King of Collectibles. If you have any questions, I'm sure you'll be able to reach out to me direct, and I'm happy to help anybody out. But hopefully everybody gets a chance to check it out, and appreciate you guys having me on here.
It's a big pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and good luck with the auction. And we're really interested to see what comes of it at the end and the final values. And it will feel very much like an involvement in the whole King of Collectibles Netflix special. But for boxing fans that listen and watch this show, it's a perfect opportunity for them, as I've said, to go in. You mentioned $25 starting bids. There are some on there that I've seen. Guys, please make sure you go and check them out. There are some little slices of great boxing pie to go and find out there. So please go and do it. Dave, thank you again. And it's been a pleasure.
All right. Same here. Hopefully we'll talk soon with some new record pricing from the auction.